Imagine this. The year is 1215. The chill of autumn clings to the English countryside as Rochester Castle rises from the mist, stone walls like fangs against the sky. Below, King John's siege lines stretch for miles. Trebuchets creak, battering rams groan, and miners dig in the flicker of torchlight. Suddenly, a tower explodes in fire, the air thick with the stench of burning fat and sulfur. Pig grease fuels the inferno, collapsing a fortress that was said to be unbreakable. Inside, the defenders, ragged, starving, still refuse to yield. This was no simple battle. This was siege warfare, a brutal, calculated art that shaped the Middle Ages. Every wall, moat, and drawbridge was a weapon. Every castle, a chess piece in the deadly game of kings. For 5 centuries, Europe's fate was decided not in open fields, but in the shadows of fortresses. The Crusader citadels of Syria, the Norman keeps of England, the Burgundian bastions of France, all masterpieces of defense and targets of obsession. Engineers and alchemists devised monstrous war machines, mangonels, trebuchets, siege towers, and sappers' tunnels, each designed to outwit stone itself. But for every advance in siegecraft came a counterstroke. Murder holes, portcullises, concentric walls, and machicolations, proof that defense was just as ingenious as attack. This was the arms race of the medieval mind, where innovation meant survival, and one misplaced stone could change the course of a kingdom. This isn't just history, it's the forgotten art of power itself. So sharpen your swords, ready your rams, and brace your walls, because we're about to breach the gates of time. Welcome to Siege Warfare, the forgotten art of medieval fortifications, where ingenuity met brutality and empires were carved in stone. Part 1. Setup. The rise of stone sentinels. The medieval castle wasn't just a home, it was a statement. A stone declaration of dominance, cast in mortar and blood. After the Norman conquest of 1066, England bristled with wooden fortresses, motte and bailey castles, quick to raise, easy to burn. Perched atop man-made hills, their wooden towers oversaw the conquered countryside, keeping restless Saxons in check. But timber rotted, fire devoured, and ambition demanded permanence. So stone rose where wood once stood. By the 12th century, stone keeps became the new order of war. The Tower of London, the White Tower at York, and countless Norman fortresses loomed across Europe like a second spine. Walls thick as trees, sometimes 20 feet wide, laughed at battering rams. Arrow slits turned defenders into deadly ghosts, their shafts whispering through narrow gaps. But warfare evolves, and so did walls. From Byzantium and the Crusader East came revolutionary ideas. Rounded towers that deflected catapult stones and frustrated miners. Machicolations that allowed boiling oil, rocks, or Greek fire to rain death from above.
These innovations transformed castles from static fortresses into living war machines, designed not just to endure, but to annihilate. By the late 13th century, King Edward I's Welsh campaigns redefined castle building as imperial art. His iron ring of strongholds, Carnarvon, Conwy, Harlech, Beaumaris, were marvels of geometry and terror. Every wall angled for optimal defense. Every arrow slit overlapped fields of fire. Moats filled with tides themselves. Garrison towns wrapped around their bases, living, breathing ecosystems of war and order. The cost? Astronomical. Harlech Castle alone nearly bankrupted the royal coffers. But its reward was control. Rebellions crushed, trade routes secured, power made permanent. These fortresses were more than defenses. They were instruments of conquest, symbols of authority, and architectural propaganda carved into the very landscape. From wood to stone, from fear to empire, Europe's skyline had changed. The age of stone sentinels had begun.
Part 2. Defensive ingenuity, layers of lethality. A medieval castle wasn't just a fortress. It was a machine of survival, calibrated to kill. Every stone, every turn in a passageway, every shadowed stairwell was part of a grand design meant to break the will of invaders before they ever reached the keep. Picture this: dawn mist curling around stone ramparts, banners snapping in the wind, and beneath them, an architecture of annihilation. The first line of defense began far from the walls. Moats and ditches dug deep and wide. Some brimmed with fetid water or sharpened stakes. Others were left dry, perfect for breaking ankles and spirits alike. In a few clever keeps, these pits doubled as fish farms, feeding defenders while starving besiegers. A grim efficiency that turned hunger into a weapon. Next came the barbican, a stone throat of death. Drawbridges creaked upward, portcullises dropped with thunder, and attackers found themselves trapped between iron grates under a hail of arrows, rocks, and molten pitch. It wasn't defense, it was execution. The walls themselves were living fortifications. Crenellations offered archers fleeting glimpses to shoot before ducking behind safety. Hoardings, timber balconies jutting from the parapets, allowed defenders to rain death straight down. And in the most brutal castles, murder holes in the ceilings of gateways turned every entrance into a killing floor. Inside, the genius deepened. The concentric design, like the rings of a serpent, made even victory hollow. Breach one wall, and another, higher and deadlier, awaited. The legendary Croix des Chevaliers in Syria epitomized this perfection. Double walls with kill zones between, interlocking towers covering every blind spot. It wasn't just strong, it was intelligent, a fortress that fought back. And yet castles weren't merely stone and blood, they were ecosystems of endurance. Postern gates and sallyports hid in shadowed corners, giving garrisons secret exits for lightning raids.
Granaries, cisterns, and deep wells ensured defenders could last years without surrendering. Every siege became a test of patience and psychology as much as force. At Château Gaillard, 1196, Richard the Lionheart's so-called saucy castle, rounded bastions deflected trebuchet stones like shields of the gods. Philip II of France laid siege for over a year, his army starving, freezing, and finally tunneling through sewage drains to claim victory. Even then, it took ingenuity, desperation, and loss to conquer one man's vision of perfection. Medieval castles weren't static. They were thinking weapons, evolving with every war, turning defense into art and terror into architecture. Every layer of stone whispered the same message: "Come closer, if you dare."
Part 3. Attacking strategies. Breaching the unbreachable. Defenders won most sieges. By some estimates, a city holding could beat attackers roughly 9-1, so medieval besiegers became engineers, logisticians, and artists of atrocity. If walls were the language of power, then attackers learned to invent new verbs to tunnel, topple, burn, starve, and terrorize stone into surrender. This is the toolbox they used: brutal, brilliant, and endlessly patient. 1. Starvation and blockade. Let time be your weapon. Most sieges were slow attrition. Encircle, cut supply lines, and wait. A well-stocked city might hold for months or years. Luck, relief armies, or disease decided the rest. Tactical reality. Attackers needed secure supply chains and camp sanitation. A failed blockade often died of rot or mutiny. Example: Jerusalem, 1099, ultimately fell after dramatic shortages and failed relief when thirst and hunger broke morale after 40 days of siege action. Production note: use time-lapse maps showing grain stores shrinking and morale meters falling. 2. Scaling and storming. Ladders, towers, and the human wedge. When patience ran out, attackers climbed. Escalade, ladders, cheap and fast, used best at night or to exploit surprise. Vulnerable to arrows, boiling oil, and murder holds. Siege towers or belfries, gigantic wooden towers rolled up to the walls, equal in height or taller than battlements. They carried archers and assault troops to the parapet and served as mobile breach platforms. Risk: a single flaming shot or well-placed trebuchet stone could turn a tower into kindling. Crews worked under continuous missile fire. Example: repeated use at Acre and during Crusader sieges. Use animated overlay showing a tower approaching, gangplank lowering, and defenders pouring oil. 3. Engines of destruction. Trebuchet, mangonels, and rams. Medieval engineers weaponized physics. Trebuchet, counterweight. The medieval cannon, capable of throwing 200 to 600 plus pound masses hundreds of yards, devastating against curtain walls and towers. Psychological effect. Sometimes the siege engine's reputation did half the work. The alleged werewolf at Stirling 1304 surrendered castles by terror of its construction. Mangonels and onagers, shorter-range torsion engines for rapid salvos of stone, incendiaries, or canister. Battering rams, protected by a sow, roofed mobile shelter to smash gates and create entry points. Production note: slow motion of a trebuchet swing, impact, and wall collapse. Sound design for concussive thunder. 4. Mining and countermining. Collapse from below. When walls wouldn't fall, attackers struck the foundation. Sappers dug tunnels under walls or towers, propping them with wood, then burning the props to collapse the masonry.
Defenders listened with rakes and drums, sank counter-tunnels, set traps or flooded galleries. Dramatic image, cross-section animation showing tunnel, fire, collapse, dust cloud, tower falling. Example, common at Chateau Gaillard and later sieges of concentric fortresses. 5. Fire, incendiaries and Greek fire. Burn to break. Flame was an equalizer against wood and machines. Greek fire or pitch mixtures set siege towers and wooden works ablaze and terrified sailors. Fire ships used in coastal sieges to destroy anchored fleets or block harbors, seen effectively at Constantinople and naval actions. Boiling oil, pitch, or sand poured through murder holes turned sallying points into murder floors. 6. Biological and psychological warfare, make them sick or scared. Medieval warfare accepted cruelty as tactic. Dead bodies and refuse catapulted over walls to spread disease or sap morale, used in multiple sieges, famously in later cases like Kaffa. Whether epidemic always followed is debated, but the tactic terrorized defenders. Psychological operations, public executions, taunts, false retreats, and displays of captured banners forced defenders into mistakes. Bribery and treachery. Pay a guard, bribe an officer, or use spies to open a postern gate, often the cleanest path to victory. Production note: use sepia reenactments and diary quotes to convey horror without graphic gore. 7. Combined arms, the orchestra of siegecraft. The most effective sieges synchronized these methods: artillery to batter, miners to undermine, towers to carry troops, and blockade to starve. Engineering, logistics, naval power, and diplomacy blended into a single campaign. Case study: Acre, 1189-1191, Crusader towers and engines against Saladin's mining and sorties. Naval blockades limited resupply. Diplomacy and relief fleets shaped final outcomes. Takeaway: success rarely came from single genius. It came from integration: artillery, engineering, intelligence, and supply. 8. Defender counters, how castles foiled the machine. Defenders innovated too. Night repairs and gabions, baskets of earth to patch breaches temporarily. Countermining to collapse attackers' galleries. Sally ports for sudden sorties to burn engines or slaughter crews. Diplomacy and relief armies, often the decisive factor. A relief force arriving turned hopeless sieges into retreats. Example: Chateau Gaillard required Philip II to adopt a sewer-sapping approach, showing patience and lateral thinking beat brute force. 9. Iconic examples and what they teach. Warwolf at Stirling, 1304. Engineering terror can induce surrender before full destruction. Acre, 1189-1191. Siege as a war of attrition and combined arms, naval and land operations merging. Sieges of Jerusalem, 1099. Escalation and final storming after blockade show how religious fervor and morale swung outcomes. Chateau Gaillard, 1203-1204. Innovation, Richard's designs, versus determined adaptation, Philip's countermining. Siegecraft was the medieval R&D lab of war, brutal, inventive, and patient. Where open battle favored numbers and valor, sieges rewarded ingenuity, logistics, and cruelty. Attackers didn't merely break walls, they broke time, patience, and the human will.
Part 4. Pivotal Sieges. Kingdoms in the balance. Every age has its breaking points, moments when stone, steel, and sheer will decide the fate of empires. Two sieges stand above all: Acre, where Christendom's might ground itself to dust, and Constantinople, where an empire 11 centuries old met the thunder of a new world. Siege of Acre, 1189 to 1191. The anvil of the Crusades. The Third Crusade's crucible, Acre, Saladin's jewel on the Levantine coast, became a tomb of kings and faith. For 2 brutal years, 100,000 crusaders encircled 40,000 defenders behind double stone walls and ramparts fed by the sea. Disease and famine stalked both camps. The stench of rot and desperation hung heavier than the desert heat. Then came Richard the Lionheart, with siege towers taller than minarets and shipborne trebuchets hurling stone and flame. Saladin's relief armies clashed endlessly outside, but the Crusaders' iron grip tightened. When Acre fell, 30,000 lay dead, its streets running red with both cross and crescent blood. Victory came hollow. Saladin lived, and the Crusaders' dream of Jerusalem was spent. Siege of Constantinople, 1453. The death of an empire, the birth of an age. Fast forward 3 centuries, the last breath of Rome meets the first roar of the gunpowder age. Mehmed II, barely 21, brought 80,000 Ottomans and a weapon unseen before. Urban's basilica cannon, a bronze monster hurling 1-ton stones that shattered the ancient Theodosian walls. The Byzantines, just 7,000 defenders, led by Constantine XI, fought like ghosts of a vanished empire. For 7 weeks they held, patching breaches by night, praying beneath collapsing mosaics by day. Then came the masterstroke. Mehmed's fleet dragged overland on greased logs, bypassing the Golden Horn's great chain. On May 29th, the final assault stormed through the Kirkaporta Gate. The emperor donned armor, cried, "The city is fallen, but I live still," and vanished into legend. By noon, the Hagia Sophia was a mosque. Rome's 1,000-year echo was silenced. Impact, when walls became the world's turning points. Acre prolonged the Crusades. Constantinople transformed civilization. One proved the futility of old faith-driven warfare. The other heralded the era of gunpowder, empires, and global horizons. Together, they mark the hinge of history, where fortresses fell and the modern age rose from the rubble.
Part 5. Legacy. From stone to powder. For 6 centuries, the castle was king, its walls the backbone of medieval power. But by the mid-15th century, the world shifted. The thunder of cannon, like Scotland's Mons Meg or Burgundy's dull Griette, shattered the illusion of invincibility. Stone met powder, and powder won. The age of towering keeps gave way to star forts, low, angular bastions born of Italian genius, designed to deflect cannonballs and mount guns of their own. No longer symbols of feudal pride, fortresses became instruments of the modern state, mathematical, symmetrical, deadly efficient. Yet the legacy of siege warfare endures far beyond the rubble. It forged the art of logistics, feeding thousands under siege, moving supplies through mud and famine. It birthed combined arms warfare, engineers, artillery, infantry, working as one. The patience of the besieger and the resilience of the besieged echo through Stalingrad's ruins, Sarajevo's streets, and every city under modern bombardment. Socially, sieges reshaped civilization. Chivalry was born from the defense of keeps. Revolts ignited from starvation within their walls. Castles became not just fortresses, but symbols of loyalty, tyranny, and survival. When you stand before the moss-cloaked towers of Bodiam or the broken ramparts of Chateau Galliard, you don't just see ruins, you see the skeleton of a vanished mindset. A reminder that no wall, however mighty, stands forever. In an age of drones and cyber wars, the old art of the siege still whispers a warning from the stones. Defense is never eternal, only as strong as the mind that built it.
Conclusion: the echo of the walls. In the end, every fortress falls, not by the hammer, not by hunger alone, but by time. For centuries, men raised towers against fear, stone upon stone, oath upon oath. Behind those walls, they dreamed of safety, of legacy. Yet no gate can bar the march of progress. The fire that once roared from Trebuchets now burns in engines and guns, and the siege continues, only its weapons have changed. Think of Rochester's burning tower, of Acre's walls drowned in blood, of Constantinople's shattered gates. Each was thought eternal. Each became a tomb for an age. But from their ashes rose something greater, the blueprint of modern warfare, the science of defense, the art of endurance. Every castle, every siege was a lesson written in dust and valor. So when you walk among those ruins, moss on stone, arrows still lodged in cracks, listen closely. The walls still whisper. Build wisely, stand bravely, and know that no fortress, no empire lasts forever. This was Siege Warfare, the forgotten art of medieval fortifications, where kings gambled with stone and destiny was measured in walls. Until next time, keep your courage fortified, your defenses tested, and your resolve unbreachable.